Okay, so today in this video, we're going to have a little bit of look at contacts and conflict in ancient Egypt. And by contacts, we mean people that they come into contact with. And obviously, sometimes when you come into contact with people, you can have some conflict and some war and some problems. So, first of all, let's look at war. And obviously, in a different presentation, we're looking at different aspects of war. But this is more about what impact war had on ancient Egypt as a civilization. So, first of all, why would you become involved in war in the first place? So, obviously, the ancient Egyptians initially were very focused on farming and they weren't very focused on warfare at all. Let's be honest, when we look at the geographical sort of placing of Egypt, they're surrounded by desert, and that acts as a natural barrier. Who can come and invade you when you've really got no neighbours? But eventually, obviously, when they lived in this sort of peaceful situation, it changed once they were attacked. So the first sort of attackers of Egypt were the Hyksos people. And once they attacked Egypt, the Egyptians sort of went, wow, we can actually be attacked, and easily so. And that's sort of what the word vulnerable there means. So, as a reaction to that, the change or the shift in Egyptian civilization was that they had to build an army. Once they sort of went from the old kingdom to the new kingdom, the pharaohs obviously decided that having a really strong army and being great in war actually reflected on them really positively, and they believed that they were very strong if they had a great army. So they weren't afraid then to now start to invade different lands around them and expand the Egyptian empire to show their greatness as a pharaoh and as a leader. The other things that changed were that men who used to do other jobs now became soldiers, and it was quite a prestigious or like a really important job in ancient Egypt. They trained very hard to make sure that they were strong, and they made sure that they were able to use a range of different weapons. So they were well trained. Obviously, there wasn't war all the time. So when they weren't at war, they farmed the land, which was obviously another really important thing for the survival of their civilization. And they also worked on building the temples and the pyramids for the pharaoh. So you can imagine it for the pharaoh. The pharaoh's getting a lot out of having an army because he can fight other people and make his reign great. But he can also make sure that the temples and pyramids that are built for him as a pharaoh or her for a pharaoh are the things that will allow them to be remembered forever. There was a great deal of respect for the soldiers. So when they actually retired, they received a plot of land, which made them, part of the sort of richer part of society rather than at the bottom. Um, at the stage where this became a part of the process of their civilization, boys as young as 5 would actually enter the army. Obviously, they wouldn't fight until they were a bit older, but the reality was that it became a part of your family to be a part of the army for Egypt. So here's a few images, and you see some of them obviously come from like carvings in the walls of the pyramids, and they're to tell the stories, to show the greatness of the Egyptian army. And you see that image on the left-hand side, very simple, just a shield and a spear, and they didn't really have much in the way of armor or protection. You can see in the bottom right-hand image with the chariots, and that was quite like a significant part of warfare in ancient Egypt. And their enemies also used chariots and horses to sort of move quickly and be able to use the bow and arrow. So once the new kingdom sort of started and there were some battles, it was against a different enemy this time. This was about the Hittites because they became a threat to Egypt and they created the need for the pharaoh to make sure that he was ready to fight because they were coming to attack Egypt and they were coming consistently. So they came from around Turkey and they were invading parts of the world where Egypt wanted to trade with. So on that basis, Egypt went, even though they weren't necessarily invading Egypt, Egypt said, you can't invade places that we have business with because they help our economy. So basically, what happened is there was a point or a place where they really disagreed about who should own it. The Egyptians wanted it, and so did the Hittites. So this place was called Kadesh, and it centered and became like a really important focal point of their arguments. And you can see the shift in society there was around trying to make sure that they could get what they wanted. All right, so trade was really becoming an important part. So Kadesh was not retained by the Egyptians after this initial battle for very long. So Sedai won. He went in. He took no prisoners, and it was really bloody. But he got Kadesh. But then obviously very quickly after that, once they established that Kadesh was for Egypt, they lost that back, and the Hittites took it back. So then Ramses II, who was Sedai's son, he said, "You know what? I'm Pharaoh now, and I'm gonna finish what my father started. I'm gonna make sure Kadesh is ours forever." And he was a really great soldier and helped the Egyptian economy boom. But this thing was really personal. He wanted Kadesh back. So then the most famous battle in Kadesh was 1274 BCE, okay, which remember in our history lesson on chronological sort of order is before Common Era. Okay, so this is before Christ was born. It's thought to be the biggest chariot battle in history. And what made it so significant was that the historical battle had sources from both the side of the Egyptians and also from the Hittites as well. Ramses II, when he went in, he separated his armies into these 4 different divisions, and this was his strategy so that he could attack them from different areas. And it turned out to be a great strategy because he ambushed the first group, destroyed them. Sorry, he went in with these 4 groups, but the Hittites actually were pretty good at war, and they ambushed that first group and destroyed one quarter of the Egyptian army. And then they did a really big battle with the second group, and they really put a big hole in that Egyptian second group. But then when the third and fourth group came in, they started to took the battle back, and they started to be able to do it. So then, even though the battle sort of went back and forth, essentially there was no winner, and all really that happened is that there were massive losses of life on both sides. The aftermath is probably even more interesting than the battle itself because it resulted in the first ever peace treaty. And that peace treaty actually basically agreed that Egypt would not invade any Hittite territory and the Hittite would not invade Egyptian territory. So the result of that was 70 years of peace between the two civilizations. Probably taught us a little bit that we could learn now that if you make a treaty, it can actually create peace for both sides, and it cuts down on the loss of life as a result of war. So you can see a real shift in the thinking from the first time when they're attacked to this time where they actually start to realize that war isn't necessarily a really positive sort of experience for their civilization. So the next one in terms of contact was about trade, a fairly more positive sort of idea. And this helped them prosper as a civilization. So because they had the Nile, they could move the products up and down the river really easy. And it also gave them access to the Mediterranean Sea, so they were able to trade with a lot more people. As the pharaohs became involved in our previous discussion around warfare, they saw that it was a great opportunity to trade with other people and to get things that they didn't have in Egypt. So they bartered, which means basically swapping goods. So they didn't use money, they just said, "Oh, we've got grain, and if you give us something else, we'll give you the grain that we have." And actually, one of the main people that they traded with was Nubia, which is what we would commonly refer to as Sudan today. And they traded their grain, things that they had, for products like ivory, which were elephant tusks, and ebony, which are dark timber, which are things like luxury items in Egypt. Okay, so obviously the pharaoh, again, to show their riches and their power, they loved these sort of products. Queen Hatshepsut, was a particularly sort of aggressive in her trade sort of strategy, and she went down the Red Sea. And there they obtained gold and exotic spices, and again showed the richness of Egypt. So they were doing so well with their grain that they were able to really trade it for other things, and people needed food. So they had that real sort of desire to trade with the Egyptians because the Egyptians had food. To make sure that they were able to do this, obviously, you would have seen in the River Nile sort of documentary or the video that I sort of made that they traveled by boat or barge down the Nile, and they could go either way. And sometimes too, they even traded out with civilizations in the desert on these camel caravans, so that they could trade for different things that those civilizations were able to have. So you can see all over that there was a real advantage, to being involved in trade for Egypt. In summary, you see that contact with other people, the warfare, and the trade changed the way that the Egyptian civilization, what was important and what they relied on. So war became important. And obviously also making sure that you could move your products, okay, so that you could get other products back. So it really shifted civilization. You can see a lot of that impact in our modern day civilization where we trade with other countries, and unfortunately we still have conflict with other countries. Okay, so thanks guys. Hope that was of some use to you.